Russell reveals shocking reason Mercedes hasn't re-signed him. McLaren has been warned on ruining their driver lineup, and Ferrari is unhappy about Hamilton and Charles's statements. Let's get into the latest F1 news. Here's what nobody talks about in Formula One: the human cost of being superhuman. While millions watch George Russell dominate on track, winning races in Canada and Singapore, there's a battle happening behind closed doors that reveals the dark side of motorsport success. Picture this. You're at the peak of your career, stepping up as Mercedes' lead driver after Lewis Hamilton's shocking Ferrari move. You've proven yourself as one of only two non-McLaren drivers, besides Max Verstappen, to win this season. You're sitting fourth in the championship standings. Your team boss wants to lock you down with a new contract. Sounds perfect, right? Wrong. Because what's holding up Russell's deal isn't money, isn't prestige, and it's not even about racing. It's about something far more personal and troubling. Mercedes is asking Russell to sacrifice up to 80 days per year for sponsor commitments. 80 days. That's more than 2 months annually spent not racing, not training, not perfecting his craft, but essentially being a corporate mascot. Smile for photos, shake hands with executives, attend events where he's the main attraction for people writing massive checks to his team. This isn't just Russell's problem. Former Mercedes champion Nico Rosberg dropped a bombshell revelation about how teams exploit their drivers. Modern Formula One has become a sponsor-driven machine where teams promise driver access as part of their deals. Limited logo space on cars means teams compensate by offering something more valuable: face time with their star athletes. Think about the psychology here. These drivers dedicate their lives to being the fastest humans on the planet. They risk everything at 300 kilometers per hour, pushing beyond normal human limits. Then, they're expected to transform into corporate ambassadors, attending simulator sessions, team meetings, and endless sponsor events. Russell's honest admission cuts deep. He rarely sees his young nieces and nephews, managing maybe one visit per year. Race weekends represent just the visible tip of an enormous iceberg of commitments that consume drivers' lives completely. The 27-year-old Brit finds himself in an impossible position. He's entering what should be the prime years of his career, but he's fighting for something revolutionary in Formula One: work-life balance. He wants what he calls a sliver of life outside the sport. Just a sliver. This negotiation represents more than contract details. It's a generational shift where younger drivers are questioning the traditional sacrifice-everything mentality that has defined motorsport. Russell openly admits he's learned what matters as he's grown older, prioritizing personal relationships and mental health alongside professional success. Mercedes boss Toto Wolff acknowledges the situation but downplays the significance, claiming good things take time and emphasizing they're working through details, not major issues. He praises Russell's performance this season, noting the absence of significant mistakes and highlighting how Russell maximizes the car's potential when everything aligns perfectly. But here's what Wolff isn't saying. Teams have created an unsustainable system where drivers become prisoners of their own success. The better you perform, the more valuable you become to sponsors. The more they demand your time, the less human you're allowed to be. The irony is crushing. Formula One markets itself as the pinnacle of human achievement, showcasing drivers as superhuman gladiators. Yet, behind the glamour, these same athletes are negotiating for basic human needs, like family time and personal space. Russell's situation exposes a broader industry problem. When former world champions like Rosberg publicly discuss how teams demand 60 to 80 sponsor days annually, it reveals how commercialization has corrupted the sport's priorities. Drivers aren't just athletes anymore. They're products being marketed and sold. Consider the precedent this sets. If Russell successfully negotiates for reduced sponsor commitments, it could trigger a revolution where other drivers demand similar concessions. Teams might face a choice between maintaining their commercial obligations and keeping their best talent happy. The timing is particularly significant. With Hamilton moving to Ferrari and Russell establishing himself as Mercedes' undisputed number one, he has maximum leverage. He's proven his worth with victories and consistent performance, giving him the power to demand better terms. This contract standoff represents something deeper than typical negotiations. It's about defining what success means in modern Formula One. Is it purely about winning races and championships, or does it include maintaining your humanity and personal relationships? Russell's fight for work-life balance might seem trivial compared to championship battles, but it represents a fundamental shift in how the next generation of drivers views their careers. They're not willing to sacrifice everything for racing success. The outcome of these negotiations will likely influence how future contracts are structured across the sport. If Russell succeeds in reducing his non-racing commitments, it establishes a new template for driver contracts that prioritizes human needs alongside commercial obligations. What makes this story compelling isn't just the contract drama, but what it reveals about the hidden costs of achieving greatness in professional sports. Russell's honesty about wanting to see his family more than once per year humanizes drivers who are often portrayed as larger-than-life figures. This negotiation will ultimately determine whether Formula One evolves to become more sustainable for its athletes, or whether it continues demanding total life sacrifice from the people who make the sport possible. What happens when Formula One teammates collide and the team refuses to step in? The McLaren Singapore incident between Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri has ignited a fierce debate about fairness in Formula One that goes far beyond just one race weekend. Picture this. You're racing at over 200 kilometers per hour through the tight confines of Singapore's Marina Bay circuit. The lights go out, 20 cars launch forward, and within seconds, your own teammate has just smashed into you while trying to avoid another driver. Your race is compromised, your championship hopes take a hit, and your team tells you they won't intervene because your teammate was supposedly avoiding a collision. How would you react? This exact scenario unfolded during the Singapore Grand Prix opening lap when Lando Norris collided with Oscar Piastri while attempting to avoid Max Verstappen through Turn 3. The contact broke Norris's front wing, but he still managed to finish third, one position ahead of his frustrated teammate. Those crucial points came directly at Piastri's expense in their internal championship battle. The radio exchanges that followed revealed raw emotion rarely heard in modern Formula One. Piastri didn't hold back his feelings toward both his teammate and the team's response. He questioned whether McLaren was comfortable with Norris simply barging him out of the way, calling the situation unfair when told the team wouldn't take action during the race. His most pointed comment came when he suggested that avoiding another car by crushing your teammate represented a pretty terrible job of avoidance. What makes this incident particularly significant is McLaren's own stated racing philosophy. The team has established what they call Papaya regulations, setting clear expectations for how their drivers should compete against each other. CEO Zak Brown previously explained these rules simply: race each other respectfully, give each other enough room, and don't make pressed contact. Piastri had an even more straightforward interpretation. Literally, just one rule exists: don't crash into each other. Yet when this fundamental principle was violated at Singapore, McLaren chose not to intervene. Their justification centered on Norris having to avoid Verstappen. But this reasoning clearly didn't satisfy Piastri, who felt his teammate should have found a way to avoid contact that didn't involve compromising his race. Former McLaren driver David Coulthard weighed in with a perspective shaped by his own experiences as a Formula One driver. He completely understood Piastri's frustration, acknowledging that the Australian presented a compelling argument for team intervention. Coulthard emphasized a crucial point that resonates throughout motorsport. The sensitivity of racing drivers demands that fairness must genuinely be fair. This principle carries particular weight coming from Coulthard, who experienced firsthand what unfairness feels like within a team structure. During his time at McLaren alongside Mika Hakkinen, he recalls being ordered to move aside for his teammate on multiple occasions. However, when situations arose where Hakkinen could have returned the favor, it never happened. Coulthard moved over from winning positions but only received a third-place finish when Hakkinen moved aside from third while Coulthard ran fourth. He never received a victory in return, creating an imbalanced dynamic that clearly still stings today. The Singapore incident highlights a broader challenge facing Formula One teams with competitive drivers. When do you intervene in disputes between teammates? And how do you maintain fairness while allowing genuine racing? McLaren finds itself in a particularly delicate position because both Norris and Piastri are fighting not just for team success, but individual championship glory. The aftermath proved telling in terms of how each driver handled the controversy. While Piastri expressed his immediate frustration over team radio, he adopted a more measured approach when speaking with media after the race. He acknowledged needing to review replays more thoroughly before reaching definitive conclusions, showing the professionalism expected at the highest level of motorsport. However, his initial emotional response revealed genuine feelings about team fairness that can't simply be dismissed. This incident also raises questions about McLaren's championship strategy moving forward. With both drivers still mathematically in contention for various championship positions, how the team manages future conflicts could prove decisive. Do they maintain their hands-off approach, potentially allowing similar incidents to occur, or do they implement more active management of their drivers' battles? The Singapore collision represents more than just a racing incident between teammates. It exposes fundamental tensions that exist when highly competitive individuals are asked to balance personal ambition with team objectives. Every Formula One driver reaches the pinnacle of motorsport by being utterly committed to winning, making it nearly impossible to accept situations they perceive as unfair. Coulthard's observations about driver sensitivity ring especially true in this context. These athletes operate at such extreme levels of precision and commitment that even minor perceived slights can feel monumental. When fairness comes into question, it strikes at the core of what motivates these competitors to risk everything in pursuit of victory. Moving forward, McLaren faces critical decisions about how to handle their driver pairing. The Singapore incident won't be quickly forgotten by either driver, and similar situations will inevitably arise in future races. The team's response to those moments could define not just their championship prospects, but the long-term dynamics between two of Formula One's most promising talents. The debate sparked by this collision ultimately reflects broader questions about competition, fairness, and team dynamics that extend far beyond Formula One. When fairness becomes subjective, how do you maintain harmony while preserving the competitive spirit that drives success? As David Coulthard perfectly summarized, fair truly has to be fair. What if I told you that one of Formula One's biggest success stories this season comes from a team principal who insists he deserves absolutely zero credit for it? Welcome back to the channel, everyone, and today we're diving deep into one of the most fascinating leadership stories in modern Formula One. Red Bull Racing has been on an absolute tear lately. We're talking 2 wins and 2 second places for Max Verstappen in just 4 races. That's the kind of form that can resurrect championship dreams from the dead. But here's where it gets interesting. The man now leading this resurgence, Laurent Mekies, keeps telling everyone he had nothing to do with it. Now, before we go any further, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because we're about to unpack one of the most intriguing power dynamics in Formula One right now. And trust me, by the end of this video, you'll understand why Mekies' approach might actually be genius. Let me paint you a picture of where Red Bull was just a few months ago. The 2025 season started with promise. Victories in Japan and Imola showed the RB21 had serious pace when everything clicked. But then came what can only be described as a nightmare stretch. 7 race weekends with just 1 podium for Verstappen. His championship hopes weren't just fading, they were practically evaporating before our eyes. The lowlights were brutal to watch. Kimi Antonelli crashed into a completely innocent Verstappen in Austria. At Silverstone, Red Bull gambled on low downforce for dry conditions. Verstappen grabbed pole position on Saturday, but when Sunday brought rain, he was wrestling a car completely unsuited for the wet conditions, dragging it home in 5th place. 2 days after that Silverstone disaster, everything changed. Christian Horner, the man who had been Red Bull's team principal and CEO for years, was suddenly out. In his place stepped Laurent Mekies, who had started the season managing Red Bull's sister team, Racing Bulls. Talk about a promotion under pressure. Now, here's where the story gets really fascinating. Since Mekies took over, Red Bull's form has been nothing short of spectacular. But every time someone asks him about his contribution to this turnaround, he gives the same answer: zero. Absolutely zero contribution. After their victory at Monza, when reporters pressed him on what he'd changed, Mekies deflected completely. After Singapore, where Verstappen delivered another competitive 2nd place that closed the championship gap to just 63 points behind Oscar Piastri, the same question came up. His response? It's still zero, guys. It's still zero. But let's dig deeper here because something doesn't add up. Verstappen himself has talked about how a different philosophy is now helping Red Bull unlock the car's potential. When asked directly if the team wasn't extracting the RB21's full performance earlier in the season, the four-time world champion's response was telling, that's pretty clear. Yes. So, what's really going on? Mekies explains it like this. There's no silver bullet, no single magical change that transformed everything overnight. Instead, he credits the relentless work of everyone back at Milton Keynes, analyzing the car's limitations race after race, asking the crucial questions about what was preventing them from exploiting the car's full potential. The upgrades that have come through recently were actually approved and overseen by Horner before his departure. So technically, Mekies isn't wrong when he says he deserves no credit for the car's improved performance. But here's what I think is really happening. And this is where Mekies might be playing a masterclass in leadership psychology. By constantly deflecting credit and maintaining that his contribution is zero, Mekies is doing several brilliant things simultaneously. First, he's protecting team morale. Nobody likes a new boss who comes in and immediately claims responsibility for improvements. Second, he's creating a culture where the focus stays on collective effort rather than individual glory. And third, he's managing expectations perfectly. Think about it. If Red Bull continues to improve, Mekies can gradually accept more responsibility as the team builds confidence in his leadership. If they hit another rough patch, he's already established that the solutions come from the collective effort of the team, not from any single person's genius. Verstappen seems to see right through this strategy, saying Mekies is probably being too nice in declining responsibility. But the Dutch driver also appreciates the approach, emphasizing how they now function as a proper team effort and how they're finally asking the right questions to understand their weaknesses. What's particularly interesting is how Mekies frames the improvement. He talks about Max's sensitivity and input, pushing the team to explore different avenues. He mentions the flow of updates and different ways to run the car. But most importantly, he emphasizes that they're not looking backward at what might have been, they're looking forward. This forward-focused mentality might be exactly what Red Bull needed after the turbulent middle part of their season. Instead of dwelling on missed opportunities or playing the blame game about why the car's potential wasn't unlocked earlier, everyone's energy is channeled toward continued improvement. The numbers don't lie. Red Bull has indeed found something special in recent weeks. The gap to the championship lead has shrunk dramatically, and they've shown competitive pace on a variety of track types. Whether it's setup philosophy, car development, or simply better understanding of the RB21's sweet spot, something has clicked. But here's what I find most compelling about this entire situation. In a sport where egos run wild and individuals often scramble for credit, we have a team principal who's doing the complete opposite. Mekies is creating space for his team to excel while positioning himself as the facilitator rather than the hero. As we head toward the final races of 2025, this dynamic will be fascinating to watch. Can Red Bull maintain this upward trajectory? Will Mekies eventually accept some credit for the team's success? And most importantly, can this collective approach help them mount a serious championship challenge? What do you think about Mekies' leadership style? Is his zero contribution claim genuine humility or strategic brilliance? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed this deep dive into Formula One's most intriguing leadership story. Until next time, keep those engines running. Picture this. You're hurtling around a street circuit at over 180 miles per hour fighting for precious championship points, when suddenly your brakes completely fail. Do you pull over and retire, or do you keep pushing to the finish line? This exact scenario just played out at the Singapore Grand Prix, and it's torn the Formula One community right down the middle. Lewis Hamilton found himself in this nightmare situation during the closing stages of the Singapore race. The seven-time world champion was charging hard in his Ferrari, hunting down positions after a strategic late pit stop. Everything was going according to plan, until disaster struck, with just a handful of laps remaining. The drama began when Hamilton's voice crackled over the team radio with words no driver ever wants to hear. "I'm losing my brakes." Moments later, the situation became even more dire as he reported complete brake failure on his left front wheel. Imagine trying to control a Formula One car traveling at incredible speeds without one of your most critical safety systems. But here's where the story gets really interesting. Instead of heading straight to the pits or finding a safe place to retire, Hamilton made a split-second decision that would spark one of the most heated debates of the season. With over 30 seconds of gap to the car behind him, he calculated that he could still salvage a points finish by staying out on track. What followed was a masterclass in car control under impossible circumstances. Hamilton had to completely reimagine his driving approach, using engine braking and racing lines to slow the car while missing corners and racking up track limit violations. It was like watching someone try to land a plane with failed landing gear, technically possible, but requiring extraordinary skill and nerves of steel. However, not everyone was impressed with Hamilton's decision to continue. Fernando Alonso, the veteran Spanish driver who was rapidly closing the gap behind the struggling Ferrari, erupted in one of the most explosive radio rants we've heard all season. His frustration was palpable as he questioned whether it was safe for Hamilton to remain on track with no brakes. Alonso's anger stemmed from his belief that racing regulations should be consistently applied. He pointed out the apparent contradiction where drivers have been penalized or disqualified for minor infractions like missing mirrors, yet here was a car with complete brake failure being allowed to continue racing. His logic wasn't entirely without merit. Paramount. Safety has always been Formula One's paramount concern. The situation created a fascinating ethical dilemma that goes to the heart of what racing is all about. On one side, you have the pure competitive instinct, the drive to finish the race and score points regardless of the circumstances. This mentality has defined motorsport legends throughout history, the willingness to push beyond normal limits when everything is on the line. On the other side, there's the question of responsibility to fellow competitors. When your car becomes compromised, do you have an obligation to remove yourself from the equation to avoid potentially endangering others? It's a debate that doesn't have easy answers, especially when split-second decisions must be made under extreme pressure. What makes this situation even more compelling is the support Hamilton has received from unexpected quarters. Sam Bird, a respected former Formula E driver and current Mercedes test driver, has publicly backed Hamilton's decision. Bird argues that any racing driver in the same situation would have made the identical choice to push through and let the race stewards sort out the consequences later. Bird's perspective carries significant weight because he understands the mindset of a professional racing driver. When you've dedicated your entire life to competing at the highest level, the instinct to never give up becomes hardwired into your DNA. The idea of voluntarily retiring when points are still possible goes against every competitive fiber in a racer's body. The technical aspects of what Hamilton accomplished shouldn't be understated either. Maintaining control of a Formula One car without proper braking capability requires an almost supernatural level of skill and experience. The fact that he managed to keep the car on track, albeit with multiple track limit violations, while dealing with brake failure demonstrates exactly why he's considered one of the greatest drivers in the sport's history. Ferrari team principal Fred Vasseur defended the decision by explaining that they adapted Hamilton's pace to match the car's compromised condition. This suggests that the team was actively managing the safety situation while still pursuing the best possible result. It's a delicate balance between competition and caution that defines modern Formula One. The aftermath has been equally entertaining, with Hamilton taking to social media to respond to Alonso's criticism in typically cheeky fashion. His Instagram post featuring a classic comedy reference showed that despite the serious nature of the incident, he maintains his sense of humor about the whole situation. This controversy highlights the evolution of Formula One's safety culture. While the sport has made incredible strides in protecting drivers over the past decades, situations like this remind us that racing will always involve calculated risks and split-second judgment calls that can't be completely regulated away. Ultimately, Hamilton finished 7th place, though he was later demoted to 8th due to track limit penalties accumulated during his brakeless final laps. Alonso finished just behind him, adding another layer of irony to the entire situation. The incident will undoubtedly be remembered as one of the most dramatic examples of driver determination and controversial decision-making in recent Formula One history. What if I told you that the most powerful position in motorsport could be decided not by votes, but by a single person's decision? That's exactly what's happening right now with the FIA presidency, and it reveals a shocking flaw in how Formula One's governing body operates. The Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile is about to hold what might be the most undemocratic election in recent motorsport history. Mohammed bin Sulayem, the current FIA president, is guaranteed to win a second term in December's election. Not because he's the most popular candidate, not because he's running the best campaign, but because of a technicality that's basically rigged the entire system. Here's where things get absolutely wild. 4 candidates initially threw their hats in the ring for the presidency, including bin Sulayem himself. Tim Mayer, Laura Villers, and Virginie Philippot all announced their intentions to challenge the incumbent. On paper, this looked like it would be a competitive race for motorsport's top job. But here's the catch that nobody saw coming. To run for FIA president, candidates must submit what's called a presidential list. This isn't just a campaign platform or a list of policies. It's a mandatory roster of vice presidents representing every major region of the world. We're talking Middle East and North Africa, Africa, North America, South America, Asia Pacific, and 2 representatives from Europe. These regional representatives can only be drawn from people who've been nominated to the World Motorsport Council, which is basically the FIA's governing body. Think of it as motorsport's parliament. Nominations for this council closed last month, which locked down the pool of available candidates for all presidential hopefuls. Now here's where the system completely breaks down. Only one person from South America was nominated to the World Motorsport Council. Just one. Her name is Fabiana Ecclestone, and she holds the keys to the entire election, since every presidential candidate must include a South American representative on their list. And there's only one person available. Whoever gets her support automatically eliminates everyone else from the race. And guess what? Ecclestone has reportedly thrown her support behind bin Sulayem. Game over. The other 3 candidates can't submit complete presidential lists because they don't have access to a South American representative. Their candidacies will be rejected, and they won't even appear on the ballot. This isn't some elaborate conspiracy or underhanded dealing by bin Sulayem. The investigation that uncovered this situation makes it clear that this is simply how the system played out within the existing rules. But it exposes a massive weakness in the FIA's statutes that essentially allows one person to determine who can and cannot run for the most important position in global motorsport. Think about how insane this is. We're talking about the person who oversees Formula 1, World Rally Championship, World Endurance Championship, and dozens of other major racing series. The FIA president influences safety regulations, sporting rules, and the future direction of motorsport worldwide. And that position is being decided by what amounts to a technicality. The rival candidates are understandably furious about this situation. Sources suggest they're considering legal action, describing what they see as democratic suppression within the FIA's electoral system. They had legitimate campaigns, genuine support from member countries, and real plans for leading the organization. But none of that matters because of one administrative bottleneck. When asked about this controversy, the FIA defended their process. They pointed out that member clubs and interested candidates had more than 3 months to submit applications for World Motorsport Council positions. They claim all the relevant information was easily accessible on their website, and that FIA administration was available to help with applications. But this response completely misses the point. The problem isn't that people didn't have enough time or information. The problem is that the system itself creates a scenario where regional representation can become a choke point that eliminates democratic choice. There are other troubling aspects to this system as well. Presidential candidates must essentially reveal which countries support them early in the process. While this might seem like transparency, it actually creates problems. Member organizations become reluctant to support challengers because they fear potential retaliation if their preferred candidate loses. This makes it incredibly difficult for anyone to build opposition to an incumbent president. The FIA statutes also lack a pre-registration process for presidential candidates. This allows people to announce candidacies without any real intention of following through, essentially using the presidential race as a publicity stunt to raise their own profile within the motorsport community. The current system was designed to allow for competitive elections between legitimate candidates. Having regional representation requirements makes sense in theory, ensuring that the FIA president has a truly global team. But the way it's implemented has created an unintended consequence, where a single nomination gap can eliminate all opposition. This situation highlights broader questions about governance in motorsport. The FIA wields enormous influence over a global sport worth billions of dollars. Teams, drivers, sponsors, broadcasters, and millions of fans are all affected by FIA decisions. Shouldn't the process for selecting its leadership be more robust and democratic? Ben Sulayem will now serve a second 4-year term as FIA president, taking him through to 2029. While his supporters will argue he's earned another term through his leadership, the manner of his victory raises serious questions about the FIA's commitment to democratic governance. The good news is that there's still time to fix this system before the next election. The FIA could modify its statutes to prevent this kind of situation from recurring. They could create backup systems for regional representation, implement pre-registration requirements for serious candidates, or restructure the entire electoral process to ensure genuine competition. But will they actually do it? That remains to be seen. For now, motorsport fans are left with an FIA president who won re-election not through the strength of his vision or the support of his constituents, but through a technicality that exposed the fundamental flaws in how the sport governs itself. The December election will proceed as scheduled, but the real competition ended the moment Fabiana Ecclestone made her choice. In a sport where every millisecond matters and every rule is scrutinized, perhaps it's time the FIA applied that same precision to its own democratic processes.